Hi guys, today we are going to be making oil pastel pumpkins. So this is a continuation of our value unit, which we completed in black and white study in the last few weeks. So you did a value scale, you did a chiaroscuro sphere, and then you did a final drawing. Most of you did. This time we're going to be looking at pumpkins, and we're going to be using colors to develop a value study in a way that shows the three-dimensionality of the object. So this is a black and white study of the pumpkin, and according to what we talked about and learned last time, you can see all the different shades and values within this pumpkin. You can see that there's blacks, you can see that there's whites, and that there's grays in between. And those things used within this actually make it look three-dimensional, so you feel like you can reach in and grab it. There's even a cast shadow, so it's a lot like the sphere that we did earlier. So let's take a look at a couple of pictures of pumpkins that are in color. So for example, this one, you can see the highlighted areas. You can see darker areas in the creases. You can see really deep oranges, mid-grade oranges, yellow oranges. So those create a gradation of value, which will make it appear three-dimensional if they're used correctly. So we're going to talk about how to use those correctly on each of the different segments of the pumpkins. Now, the pumpkin you choose may be different than this one. I've got another picture here of a realistically painted pumpkin. Sometimes paintings are better to look at when you're doing your drawing, just because you can see very clearly highlights, shadows, deep shadows, and then there's midtones in the middle. So we're going to be working with that. And then it's also got a background, it's also got a cast shadow, just like we did when we did our spheres. And all of those things will make it look like your pumpkin is three-dimensional. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you how to draw a pumpkin. And I'm going to be doing that in marker first, and then after that I'll have another one that I do in pencil, because when you do your oil pastel pumpkins, you don't want to have a black marker outline. But for the purpose of you being able to see the outline well and how it's done, I'll be doing it in marker. Okay, so here's my paper. I've just decided to use a brown piece of construction-like paper. You can use a brown, you can use oranges, you can use a darker color. That'll be your choice. I just don't want you to use white. I'd prefer you to use a colored background. So when you are drawing your pumpkin, you want to think of it as not being a perfect circle. For most of the pumpkins that we draw, they'll probably be sort of oblong. They could be wider or they could be taller, so you could do one this way. I'm going to be doing one that's a little wider, and I do have a reference photo that I'm going to be using. So I'm going to do this one. So I'm going to take a look at that when I'm drawing the pumpkin, but I want you to recognize the shape, and if you have to, just take your finger and kind of outline with your finger the shape of the pumpkin. And really that's the motion that you're going to be doing with your pencil when you draw these. We'll add the stem in later. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw the outline shape. Okay, so don't worry if you make a mistake, because you'll be doing yours in pencil and you'll be able to erase that. But that is similar to the shape here. Your pumpkin doesn't have to match perfectly the one that you have in your source photo, but you should be using that as sort of a guideline. So now when I look at the pumpkin, I can see where the stem is going to be. And the stem in this shape is toward the upper part in the top. And if that stem were cut off, it'd be just kind of like an oval shape there. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to draw the oval shape in there. So there's the oval, and that would be the base of where the stem is going to go into the pumpkin. So I'm just going to draw the curved line that goes up. And then this stem is still pretty much attached and kind of goes off into the area over there. And then I have another piece that goes there. This side kind of leans over. It's kind of sharp, probably where it was attached to a bigger vine, and then kind of comes down and around. Now I'm doubling up my line here because if I were doing this in pencil, that's what I would do. Then I would go back in and erase this line that you can see through the middle of the pumpkin. And then the next thing I want to do is draw the segments. And the thing that I want to point out about any pumpkin is that the segments all come up to this middle area where the stem would be. So where these little roots kind of point out, if you think about when you've held or seen a pumpkin, these kind of come out at little points, and then they go into segments with deeper creases around each side. So I am going to draw the curved line out and then back in. Now that's the other thing to remember when you're drawing these pumpkins. If you look at the picture, the segments all curve in one or another direction. So the segments on this side will curve out to this side of the pumpkin and match, and the segments on this side, well, they curve outward that way and match this side of the pumpkin. And that's also what's going to help make it look more rounded and realistic, because if you drew your pumpkin just round and then drew straight lines on it, then it's just appearing as a flat ball. But if you draw your lines this way and have your lines go this way and that way, then it appears more rounded. So make sure that your lines are curving in the right direction. And then you'll notice that some of these, you don't see much of the segment itself. Like in the back, they just kind of curve out toward the back of it because you can't see that side of the pumpkin from our point of view. And then we'll curve this one down. This one's going to curve out this way, and not all the curves are perfect. Maybe your pumpkin has a little bump there. And then I've got a little one that kind of goes through here and here. So this would be essentially my pumpkin sketch. Then I would have maybe some background, because your pumpkin drawings are going to have background just like your sphere did. So it's sitting on a surface, and there might be a cast shadow. My shadow, for the most part, goes off of this direction. And then if you notice in my picture, there's a reflection at the bottom. So there's a very big coarse shadow here, and then the surface kind of drops and there's a reflection of the pumpkin. So I might include that in my final image. So this would be what you start with, except for yours will be in pencil. So I'm going to stop here for a minute, and then I'm going to make another one of these in pencil, and I'm going to show you how we do the shading and how to build up your layers with the oil pastel. Okay, so I have sketched out my pumpkin in pencil, and the other thing that I have done is I've taken my pencil and I've sort of marked out some of these shadow areas. So the things that you can see here and here, these lines, I've kind of put in like a little contour map that will show me where those changes will be on this. And I know that's probably a little bit hard to see, but you can kind of see some of the areas that I've given myself just a little bit of a guideline as to where those will be. Just make it a little bit easier. Okay, now I'm going to show you the pastels I'm going to be using, and I'm using school oil pastels, so these are going to be the same type of supplies that you get to use. Normally we have 2 different brands, 2 to 3 different brands, and a lot of times they will have been used. This one here is from a set of portfolio oil pastels. I tend to find that these are really good for a lot of blending, but they don't make really dark marks. A lot of times they're a little bit transparent. So if you're using a darker paper and you use one of these on top, you want to layer that with a little bit of white underneath and then put this on top, and you'll get a better, more opaque color. This is pretty much the same color, but this one is from the Crayola oil pastels, and that's this brand. These all look a little bit dirty and used, but they're going to work just fine for what we're doing. The Crayola oil pastels are a little more condensed. There's a little less oil in them than these, so they'll make a more opaque, darker mark on your paper. So I like to use both of them because they both have their advantages. So I'm going to pick out my colors. So if you look at your color scheme in your picture, I want you to try to match the colors that you're going to need. So obviously you're going to need some oranges, some yellows, some browns, and probably some white. So I'm going to pick out some of these, and once you've selected yours, since we don't want to be sharing a whole lot of supplies, you want to keep those in the Ziploc bag that you have been given at the beginning of the school year. And then when we're done, we'll put them in the dirty supply container so that we can spray those down again. I've got some browns, various shades of brown. And in the background, I've got a lot of blues and grays, which I'll get into that later. But I'm going to start just on the pumpkin for now, just to show you how to get started with that. Picking out some darker shades in different varieties. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I'm just going to work in just one section for right now so you can kind of see how that goes. The first thing I'm going to do is put down a little bit of white, and that's going to be like an underlayer. Now after I'm done, I'll probably add white back in where these highlights are, but in order to keep some of those areas lighter, I want to have a good white undertone there. So I know this area is pretty light, so what I'm going to do is just put in a little bit of white through there, and right along this edge I can see that it's lighter. So I'm going to go over that edge there and layer in some white. So it's going to look really choppy and very crayon-like when I'm starting this drawing, and that's okay because we're going to do lots of blending afterwards that are going to make it look more like an oil painting and less like crayon. Okay, so I'm coming in where these really light lights are, and I'm even going to go up on the stem just a little because I like to work around and recognize all the similar light values at the beginning. So I know that those are going to be all my really light areas, and by putting down the white, I'll assure that I kind of get to keep those white. And I'm just going to put in light through here, because if I were to pick out on my pumpkin, the lightest areas, it would be right here, right here, right here, and right here. So as long as I have my whites in there, then I'll be assured that those are going to stay white. Okay, a little bit through there. Okay, so now I've got the whites in. Now I'm going to go in and add in a layer of kind of a light orange. If your oil pastels get this kind of stuff on them because they rubbed up against each other and they get kind of dirty, the best thing you can do is get a piece of scrap paper, which you can get a scrap piece of drawing paper, notebook paper, or printer paper, whatever works, and just clean those off. So what I do is I just kind of rub them around until when you look at the oil pastel, it's clean. Because nothing is worse than when you're working on your oil pastel drawing and all of a sudden, bam, you've got greens or blues and your oranges where you didn't want them. And you have to kind of pick them off and see how that works. Okay, so it took a little bit of effort, but that's all clean on the surface now, so it's good to use. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is go in and just kind of put in a base layer of this color. And it may mix in with my pencil just a little bit. That's okay. I'm going to be, like I said, I'm just adding in very basic colors right now. I'm going right over those whites because those are actually going to be highlighted again later. Put some in here. Yep, it's bringing out my pencil marks quite a bit, but that's okay. I'll show you what we're going to do with those later. I know this is going to look a little rough at first, so are yours. That's okay. We don't want to think that we're just going to jump in and immediately have the effect of a finished picture. Oil pastels work best when they're blended really well and that when you layer them. Okay, so now I'm going to put some back here where I didn't have white because there's some base orange there. And maybe just put a little bit that's going to blend into the shadow area. Okay, so my pumpkin's looking really yellow-orange right now. That's because I haven't put in any of those darker values. Okay, so now I'm going to take one of my darker orange reds, and I'm going to start putting in some of that color. It's going to look really dark right now. Put those in. This one in, and I'm going to blend that with more colors too. So just about everything I'm doing right now is going to be covered up with more layers. And it looks very patchy, but that's okay. It's going to come together in the end. You just have to keep working it. I used to tell most of my students that when you're working with oil pastel, you're going to blend, blend, blend. And if your arm doesn't hurt or you don't break an oil pastel mid-process, then you may not be doing it right. I know it doesn't seem right for an art teacher to say, oh yeah, break my supplies. I'm not asking you to break the supplies. I'm just simply saying that you really kind of got to apply some pressure and stuff. Right now I'm not applying a whole lot of pressure that's going to come when I go to do the layers later. So if you look at this, you can see it's very broken up. I've got dark values, I've got some mid-tone values, and I've got some light. So I'm on my way to reproducing that area of pumpkin. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put in some of the really darks. These little creases have some of the dark areas, and down here. And I would say these are a very dark brown, even maybe a little bit of black in there, but for now, because I really don't like to use the color black, sometimes it will muddy up your picture. It's better to kind of create your own black by mixing your colors than it is to just kind of pick a black, because that's too harsh of a contrast. Okay, so I'll probably end up putting a little blue in there, just so it looks more like a cooler black, whereas this is more kind of a warm black. Okay, so I've got some of those, and I'm also going to come up here because there's a little brown mixed in over there and over here and here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put in a little of this brown up here because I can see that that's going to be the same tone or color. So a lot of what you are doing is going to be done through observation. So really, if you want to be able to draw this pumpkin here, the key is that you are really studying this picture. So oftentimes I see students and they have their picture laying way over here and they're just working away, which is awesome because you are very intent on your drawing, but it's also working against you because you're not observing what it is that you want to recreate. Now, I'm a firm believer that you should be original in your art, but I'm also a believer that you need to learn your process and techniques to assist you in doing that. In this particular lesson, we are reproducing another picture simply so that we can learn how to create those tones and values and how to make that three-dimensional with using color. So this is an exercise in learning how to do that, and these are skills and tools that you will use when creating your own more original art. Okay, so now I'm going to go back in with some more oranges, and I'm going to go back into some of these areas that need some more blending. So I'm pressing harder. Whoops, I just broke one. There we go. But that's okay. Broken oil pastels, just like crayons, still color. So I'm blending, blending, blending. And as you're blending, you may get these little chunks that come off here. I call them oil pastel boogers because sometimes you just have to pick them and take them off, okay? All right, and then we're gonna be putting some more blending through here. I see my pencil still kind of showing up below there. So you wanna make sure that you draw lightly when you do yours. Blend, 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 blend. All right, and I'm going to continue to keep blending and reworking this area. While I'm working, I'm going to pause this real quick, and then I'm going to switch into time-lapse mode so you can see a more quick version of how this pumpkin continues to develop. All right, so this is my final product. I would say I spent probably about 45 minutes on this, but you can definitely see that there are different values that show how it is rendered three-dimensionally. Not exactly the same as what I have in here, but definitely kind of like my final result. So anyway, good luck with your pumpkin drawings. I can't wait to see them.